Hello, welcome. I'm Angel, and this is Angel's Starlight Tarot. If you're here, I thank you for your support and the sharing of your time. In the last video, I introduced my great-grandmother, spiritualist minister, Reverend Pearl Reinhardt, and I'd like to add to that just a little bit before I get into the reason I tarot, my perception of tarot, what tarot was for me as a child growing up, and my perception of it then into what it is today in 2022 after living the life that I've lived. So in the last video, I read you an article that was written by Reverend Rick Root. If you haven't seen that video, I do encourage you to go back and listen to it. My heritage, my roots, what I grew up learning about, the words that I grew up hearing, etc. When I came across that article, I also discovered at that point that the church was still existing, and my great-grandmother's congregation was still operating out of it underneath Reverend Rick Root. And I knew that I had to go and see what was going on. This church, again, I always heard that my great-grandmother owned a church and that it was on Judd Road in Flint, but it never dawned on me until I seen the exact church that it was literally mere feet from an area that I grew up hanging out in. And I can very much so remember the older kids that I would hang out with in that area referring to the Skull Church, the Red Light Church. I would hear their parents mention it. It never dawned on me in those years that that was my great-grandmother's church. So the day that I found the church and actually went and paid it a visit, it was a beautiful, beautiful day. It was sun, lots and lots and lots of sun. There was also beautiful clouds that were quite sporadic. And I pulled up outside of the parking lot, the empty parking lot, before I knew the congregation would be showing up. And I just wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel them come in. I wanted to see that energy, taste it, smell it, feel it. And so I did. And as I pulled in across the street, and as the congregation began to arrive, all of a sudden there was absolutely huge angel clouds up above the church. I have photos of this on my old phones. Even for me at that stage of the game, it was mind-blowing. I allowed the congregation to get in and get settled, and then I proceeded to pull into the parking lot. And I was doing so quietly, not to be sneaky by any means, but out of respect to not interrupt what it was that they had going on as they settled in. Lo and behold, I pull in, I park. There was a time shortly before this that I was creating these necklaces here. You can't really see it very well, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. That is 4 horseshoe nails bent into the shape of a cross, wrapped in wire, and then dipped in polyurethane. And I was making them by hand at the time. And I had brought the congregation a gift, a blessing. As I was gathering my senses and grounding myself and getting the necklaces together, lo and behold, I bumped the horn on my van. I laughed out loud because I knew immediately that my great-grandmother was there blowing the trumpet. She was warning her congregation, all of the above. And I proceeded to go in. The next little while is a bit of a blur, but I did sit with the congregation. I did speak with Reverend Rick Root after service was over for a bit. During service, a gentleman asked Reverend Rick Root if he could take the crystal out of the blessing jar that he had put in there, explaining that he now knew who that crystal was for. And he had pulled out a small piece of clear quartz, similar to the one there that you see. And he gave it to me. I also received the message that day that I was to watch for the rainbows. Great Graham told me to watch for the rainbows. And I have since then very much so watched for the rainbows, as I also raised 3 of them. It was a beautiful beginning to an end of a discovery, for lack of better terms. I seen firsthand the love that they had for my great-grandmother. And outside of my mother, I hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen a people appreciate her for what she was. And at that point, I had already understood so much of what she was, because I am. That it was just very, very beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of pivot into an attempt, per se, for lack of a better term, to help you understand tarot, my perception of tarot, why I tarot. Kind of like I already said, what it was then, what it is now. My perception of tarot then was exactly the image that society gave us. I knew that my great-grandmother could, quote-unquote, pick up any deck and read it. I didn't understand then what I understand now. And that is, once you understand the storyline of a tarot deck, you can kind of pick up any deck and read it. You connect with some more than others, etc., but that's for another day. It was the perception that society had given us of what a psychic was, what a medium was. Some quiet, dark, shadowy, taboo, fortune-telling, unholy method of connecting with spirit, or considered unholy. But I knew that my great-grandmother preached the Holy Bible from her pulpit while she worked with energy and the surrounding, whatever form, as you heard, whatever form she decided to pick up. I knew that since I was a very, very young child. So it was definitely something that never made sense to me because I knew of my great-grandmother. So I grew up down the road, literally 5 houses down the road from what some consider the most beautiful Catholic church in the state of Michigan. I, of course, didn't understand then what I do now. But I definitely had a love of playing cards, shuffling cards, playing single-player card games, playing 2-player card games, playing spades with my friends. There was something with shuffling and dealing and the red, black, and white that I now know to be balance. There was something there that was very, very attractive for me. Very calming for me. Again, I didn't understand then, but I definitely had a deck of cards in my hand a lot when I was growing up. And I loved red, black, and white color schemes so much, and the suits and the numbers so much, that at about 13, 14 years old, with total lack of knowledge as to what I was doing, I painted my bedroom that was on the front of the house, just 5 houses down from the church, in a town that is saturated with churches of all denominations. And I painted the windows on the front of my house solid so you couldn't see through them. I had painted the walls in my room all red, black, and white with splatter paint and handprints, and I was that child. The windows were painted white, and I had put each suit in the 4 panes of glass. So my love for cards has just something that has always been there for me. I didn't know then that was one of the original ways that spiritualists read the energy, sorted out the energy that was around, or that they were looking into, feeling into. It's very, very similar to what we do with, say, a poker game. You know, they're reading the energy of the table. They're reading the cards. They're reading the energy from the people, aka, poker face, that kind of thing. I'm going to back up just a little bit, just to kind of give you the heads up that I had a really great experience of healing happen for me the other day. And so some of this I will definitely be reading from the channeling that came forward the other morning, that ended up in pen and paper form. I have a love for writing as well. I write. I have always written. Daily journals, daily calendars, daily planners, in detail, through hard times, happy times, etc. And many years ago, 13, 14 years ago at this point, I broke my hands, and I was no longer able to write or shuffle cards. My 2 releases that I've always had in life were taken from me, frankly. And it was a pain that continued for the next decade plus, that wouldn't go away. The pain was in the bones. It wasn't in the muscles. It wasn't a matter of physical therapy and work them out and build up the strength. You have to use your hands for everything, so I was always using my hands. And I'm certainly not a lightweight, so I used my hands a lot. And I could write 2 or 3 sentences and pretty much not be able to write anymore. And if I did certain things that affected them too much, then I paid for it for days, sometimes weeks, depending on what it was that I had to continue to do with my hands. Well, I woke up the other morning and grabbed my notebook and my brand new, well, it just had never been used. Not that it was brand new to me, but it hadn't been used yet. My amethyst ink pen. And I just started writing. And before it was over with, I had literally written 20 pages straight up old style. It just brain, heart to hand, pen to paper, flowed out like it had for most of my life before I couldn't do that anymore. And my hand would cramp and I would notice it, and my brain would be like, oh girl, you're gonna pay for this, you're gonna be hurting tomorrow, uh-oh, what are you doing? And it just kept flowing. The beautiful part of healing that transpired was when I got up the next day and had been up a couple hours and realized that my hand was hardly sore. Hardly sore to the point that if I wanted to start writing again, I couldn't. And I believe I did, even. So that beautiful moment for me is going to kind of come out through this video in the quote unquote, my tarot story, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, the table that's in front of you. This is not abnormal for me in my life. Every house that I've ever lived in has had setups similar to these for various reasons. I grew up calling them my shrines, actually, is what I called them. I just knew that I needed my treasures around me, my memorabilia. I've had a lot of people that have had to leave us way before we were ready to. Far more than most others. And that kind of memorabilia from funerals and trinkets and just stuff had to stay out and stay around me. They were around me. I knew that, and they were to be honored to some degree, regard. So this isn't necessarily, it's not, this isn't a show for me. This is my real life coming forward on a platform where I hope to help others understand a little bit more, perceive things a little bit differently, gain a little bit more knowledge. In essence, uplifting to higher vibrations, higher frequencies, shifting timelines with the rest of us. My great-grandmother, my mother, and myself, we all grew up in times where we could have never made this happen. Not just because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have a YouTube platform, but because the topic that is so easily spoken of today on these platforms was straight taboo then. Unfairly in a lot of rights. And I can also see today how that transpired a little bit because of the different energies, because of what's going on in people's minds when they're learning and gaining and understanding. We do have that Lilith energy right now. Throat chakra. Lilith energy around right now that is really coming to the surface. That is that dark, shadowy, doing it for all the wrong reasons energy. And that is frowned upon. That isn't accepted by the Most High. So with that said, move on to some of what was written the other day. as I was thinking about how tarot has transpired into my life up to this point. So as I kind of already mentioned, it's very similar to a poker game. Hashtag break the stigma. A poker player is very much so reading the energy of the table. They're very much so reading the cards of the table. There's so many areas in life where we really do this and it's accepted, and yet there's this whole little taboo area where it's not so much, and it's not so much understood. I apologize for the pause, guys. Let's jump into when I received my first reading. I actually got my first reading when I was 15 years old and about 3 or 4 months pregnant for my first daughter, who is now 27 years old. It, again, was a stereotypical kind of situation. Went to a lady's house, the lights were dim, sat in her living room, definitely felt odd, but what she read to me was ultimately true in a metaphorical sense and otherwise. We didn't have the amount of metaphysical outlets that we have today. We didn't have the internet the way that we do today, and the conversation was taboo to most. Definitely not a general conversation the way it's become. I remember when the first shop that I knew of opened in our big mall called the Blue Moon. It felt so right, but the selling of the cards threw me off. You see, back then, I grew up being told that tarot cards are to be given to you by another psychic. You didn't just buy a deck of cards. So it felt weird to see them on a shelf for sale. I had my second personal read in about, it was 2003. A family member of mine, another one of my great-grandmother's great-grandchildren, came over for some girl time and brought her deck. In that spread, she pulled 3 cards that spoke to possible pregnancy. Only the kid's dad and I, at the time, knew that that was even a possibility. She insisted that the cards were, as I insisted that the cards were complete bullshit. Well, the cards weren't bullshit. I was in fact pregnant with number 3, and there was no way for her to know that. And I just so happened to know the exact date that we had yet again conceived. It wasn't too long after that I got my first deck. I was so drawn to that damn store, but rarely got to go at the time. But I went to the Blue Moon and allowed my deck to find me. It was the only thing that felt acceptably right at the time. I had no idea if it was right or not. It felt somewhat wrong to be buying cards, but I knew I was supposed to have them, and that was the only means of doing so. And so I followed through with what felt right to me at the time and allowed my deck to find me. And now we hear that terminology all the time, every day. Let your stuff find you. What is meant for you will come to you. And it's true. I ended up with the Mythic Tarot, the Fireside Edition, the 2001. It's from the copyrighted original 1986 deck. It's a little bit different than your typical, your typical Rider-Waite decks per se. There's no numbers on our major arcana. And even the book lists them out in a completely different fashion than what we know them to be today. But again, there's no numbers on those cards. So things have evolved, per se. Which means I'm going to go ahead and skip all of that extraness because that's in a nutshell. I'm sorry for the sound of the pages, guys. I played in my deck and the storybook off and on for years. I also paid attention to astrology and zodiac energies as much as possible as I raised 3 kids while raising myself. Sorry about my phone as well. Thought I turned down volumes. I raised 3 kids while raising myself. Reading energy is second nature or first nature in its technicality. I didn't need the cards to tell the story. The story was continuously at lightning speed being downloaded to me in my 11,000 tabs running open in my brain. Equals, the energy in the cards are like an assistant that helps sort the energy that's already being felt. My world was very much surrounded in constant dark energy, and at every turn. When I think back and attempt to find the light bodies in my past, I can't find them. Or there's just mirrored glimpses of them in and out of my life, in screenshot style. The constants in my life have been, well, dark, shadow, working against the true lights, walking. The lights were by far a minority in my first 41 years, and I realized 41 breaks down to a 5, the number of change. You'll also notice as I read through this how many times the number 3 is brought up. I had always kept what I called my treasures very close by and out as I grew older. In my young adult life, I was the mother to 3 rainbows. And no, I'm not referring to their sexual preferences. And we had many very near and dear that had to leave us before we were ready for them to. Guess I already said that. I always had what I called my shrines around the house in their honor. My rocks, my memorabilia, my special trinkets, their obits and funeral tokens, etc. I kept their energy around because it stayed around. They were always there, and especially when no one else was, which was most of my life. I always knew that I had an unseen army behind me, always. They made themselves known to me, always. I quickly learned their language when they're trying to get my attention. So through the years, I would play tarot with myself. A few, 3 of us to be exact, would play astrology and numerology together on occasion, but it was pretty much just me and my books. My heart, my soul, my brain, and absorbing the knowledge left and right, connecting the dots, seeing the spider web unfolding before my eyes. And eventually, I also bought my Fairy Lenormand deck. I owned astrology books and zodiac books and numerology books as young as 12, 13 years old. I have paid attention for my entire life. Star scrolls were something that my mother always had, month after month. I remember walking up to Ponderosa, which was again just 5 houses up the road, and they had the old star scroll machines, and you'd put your 2 quarters inside and you'd turn the dial to your zodiac sign, and it would spit out your star scroll. And they were amazing. Now I understand how absolutely amazing they were to have then, because there was really so much information on them in conjunction to astrology and zodiac energies. So this is something that I was born into. It truly is my life. Let's go ahead and fast forward a bit to when I was like 39, 40 years old. 4 is the number of foundation, building, and the number of our archangels. My life spun on a dime, needless to say. Did a complete 180 in what now feels like overnight. I mean, the bulk of it literally was overnight. And on April Fool's Day, again, 4 + 1, 5, the number of change. And the day before my adult son's birthday. The giggle is I refused to have him on April Fool's Day and had him 58 minutes or so outside into the second. Well, just over 3 years later, and my life looks absolutely nothing as it once did. And in that process, I discovered the social media YouTube world of tarot, energy, astrology, numerology, brains that talked about the stuff that my brain talked about. I wasn't big into YouTube at the time, so I just didn't know we now had a platform in this new phase of our world. Like-minded, intuitive people were really out there. A sense of relief that's indescribable after 40 plus years of walking it damn near alone and figuring it all out alone without all the words attached like we have today. At about 30 years old, like 2009, 2010, and what I now know to be more than likely coming out of my Saturn return, was a major life shift for me. And after about 13 years of being an at-home mom in a poorly financially unstable, me sober while others consumed the devil's poison, I separated from my kid's dad and went back to work in a different salon at the mall. Trade secrets. Trade secrets. Wow. And again, closer to the blue moon. I couldn't spend, but I could go in and ground. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but I do know. Now. I wasn't supposed to know then. I was just supposed to do. I left that salon to go to our smaller mall on the other side of town and help manage a Sephora inside JCPenney's. For those who don't know, Sephora is high-end skincare, makeup, and fragrance. And again separated from the blue moon environment. A year later, Sephora decided to open a new location in our big mall, where I promoted over to help the new store open from bare walls start to open, and was back in the energy of the blue moon, crystals, scents, cards, energy, grounding. This time they had a tarot reader by the name of Chris that literally came and found me in my store. It was quite the encounter and began a friendship of many years. He and his wife knew what I knew, and it was so comforting. I eventually bought my Fairy Lenormand cards. So 2010, 2011. The next years we will call a blur of extreme hards, back to back to back, and on the constant. We had moved so much in my life up to that point that my treasures now stayed packed in a box. I had lost so many pieces of my rocks and such over the years that I just quit unpacking it. Just months before my life did that abrupt 180, about 3 years ago, my box of stuff deep in an upstairs closet quite literally screamed at me. Now, our guides, our higher self, spirit, of course they don't scream at us. It's the quiet stuff. It's not the loud stuff. But the people who feel me on this will feel me on this when I say that they very much so are still capable of screaming at us when we are not hearing what they're trying to tell us. And that day, I was very much so screamed at. And all of a sudden, I literally did hear, "Get us out of here." And it was the box that was in the closet. I was literally like, what the fuck? And I heard it again. "Get us out of here, we can't breathe." It was my room, but energetically speaking, I was not allowed to sleep or rest there. The darkest energy of all slept there. I slept with my 3 pit bulls on my couch that was owned by my grandparents, aka the Reinhardts and the Lights. I was safe to rest there, no matter the energy that surrounded me. I couldn't get to the box right away. A 3rd shifter slept in there. A few days later, I heard it again out of nowhere. "Get us out of here." And so I did. First piece out was my hunk of amethyst. And that's when #Amethyst Help Save My Life was born. It literally did save my life. And I knew in that moment that that's what was happening. I didn't know what was to come, but I knew it was happening. The next many months, for many months and the next many months, had literally been some of the absolute hardest and lowest times of my life, leading up to that next tower falling on the night before and leading into April Fool's Day, when life abruptly and without question changed and spun on a dime. The Fool emerged. In the previous decade, I had been with marijuana as medicine. I had switched my intuitive researching abilities from hair care, skin care, makeup, to marijuana as medicine. I live in Michigan, where we've been medically legal since 2008. I went from being in love with doing the hair and nails at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, into falling in love with the product itself for the hair care, skin care, makeup, into learning that something that had been in my system since I was in my mother's womb was actually a life-saving miracle medicine, and I needed to know why. Just like all the other products, people I had worked with and the people I had worked with before in my life. I had changed a lot of lives in the most beautiful ways through proper product knowledge in skincare, hair care, and makeup. Sometimes there's nothing like being able to pass along the knowledge to clear up that skin condition or cover up that scar flawlessly while teaching them to do the same. I don't just do it, I teach it so that you can get it and know why too. But once my whole life with marijuana medicine completely made sense as medicine, I not only had to know why, but I had to help. Through our Michigan marijuana community, I met a few like-minded people in spirituality and marijuana. And when my life spun, it just so happened that one of them was opening a new club that would combine both. He put me on as his vice president and manager. The Green Acres Church was born. Although short-lived, it was exactly what I needed in those days, and I was able to help the people all over again in a new and improved way. And so I, from there, From there, my 3D personal world continued to collapse. Every single person was ultimately harming me, was pulled away one by one, sometimes 2 by 2. I eventually left the county I was in for kind of the first time and found the YouTube tarot community all at the same time. Over the last 3+ years, I have absorbed so much confirmation and words to my entire existence that I knew it was time to yet again pivot. But I still wanted to combine both the spirituality and plant medicine. With the biggie being what I've done to help heal thousands over the last 13 years or so, from curing their own cancer to reversing thyroid condition that was scheduled for surgery, to wounds, to mental discomfort, to sleeping issues and beyond. But the pivot was screaming louder and louder. Hence the start, then stop of the existing channels. To do right by YouTube, I have to be careful in this department. Much more careful than I want to have to be by far. The spiritual, intuitive tarot and energy is much easier to achieve in that department, and will certainly easier reach the masses. And then I will create what I've done to help the people understand marijuana on a separate channel, where both will collide with the people along the way. So to back it up a bit, I have gained a tremendous amount of understanding and vocabulary into our today's world of spirituality and what that means for me and has meant for me up to this day in my life, and what it could mean for your story going forward. First, although referred to as a better nurse or doctor than most nurses and doctors a million times over, I am not. Either in the eyes of, check, boom, sorry y'all. Point being, I've been referred to as the nurse and the doctor more times in my life than I can count. But I am not in any means a licensed, college-educated medical professional of today. You should always talk to your personal practitioner, if so guided to do so. We have to appease the YouTube gods and clarify that my videos are for educational and entertainment purposes only. I'm here to help broaden your own mind, feel your own feels, to create questions in your own mind that you then go and find answers for yourself. Because ultimately, there's no better researcher on you and for you than you, medically, spiritually, or otherwise, whether that leads you back to me or again otherwise. Just a moment, y'all. Coffee screaming my name, and we need to clear the throat chakra. This is a little bit more fumbly than I anticipated, but I knew there was kind of a lot of information in here, and I didn't go back through it before I'm putting it out to you guys. It very much so channeled out for hours the other day, and now here we are today. So if you're still here with me, spending your time, sharing your energy, enjoying my story, again, I definitely do appreciate you. I thank you. Let's get some smoke going. So for me, tarot is a metaphorically told story that helps me organize the energies as an extra tool. Never should you leave a tarot or an energy reader feeling less than. Not ever. If you feel less than, I encourage you to pull away, ground, and look at it. And maybe it will help you figure out why something within that specific reader, that specific energy, the way you were perceiving it at the time, back away. You should never feel less than. You should feel confirmed in what you already know to be true. Can you look for answers within the cards? Yes, of course you can. Can you see potential energy that may be coming in? Yes. However, we always have free will to change the energy. Bottom line. It is what it is. What already is will be. And we always have free will to change that energy, even though it already is. You should never look at a tarot or energy read as an end-all be-all. That's not why we're here, and if someone tells you otherwise, they're a fraud. Period. End of story. For me, as an intuitive energy reader, psychic medium, oracle light worker, working in the light with the archangels, galactic council, and God, approved and entrusted by the Most High himself, I'm here to help you find you. You on a new level. Just like all the light workers that have walked me or given me a shoulder to lean into over the last few years and beyond. When you hit that note, those notes that just resonate, that give you chicken skin, make your hair stand up, or the back of your neck crawl, or your ears ring, you know you're resonating with your own soul, your higher self, your guides, your angels, your loved ones, God, your own you. It's the energy speaking to you. It's the energy trying to let you know. Tarot is a card game of reading energy very, very similar to what we witness during a game of poker. Let's break the stigma. We all have the capabilities to read the energy in the air. A sixth sense, so to speak. You know when you're encountering someone who doesn't feel good to you, maybe creeps you out a little bit. You're reading the energy. Some are just simply more advanced in the process, helping to lead the way, like my great-gram in her day, and so many others before me. In my day, we had to walk 500 miles to see a deck of tarot cards. You kids should feel the wealth you have before you. Peace, calm, still be with you. Love and light. If you are still here with me, thank you so much. The more we interact with this channel and these videos, the faster the messages will get to the masses that need to hear them. I don't necessarily resonate with the you may not resonate with these messages. It's more of a you know when you resonate with these messages. You know what is for you, what is not for you.